So I'm going to hand over to Kevin. Kevin's a clinical psychologist and one of our colleagues here at the centre. He's got a special interest in worry, and he's the co-author of a best-selling self-help book called Overcoming Worry, which I can thoroughly recommend. So I'm going to hand over to Kevin now.
Okay, so I hope you can all hear me and see me. It's a bit strange. I'm now having a conversation with a laptop, and the idea that there might be people out there in the world of the internet sort of listening in. So welcome everybody. So just to begin by saying that we are in a time of life where there is significant amounts of uncertainty in our societies, within our communities, within ourselves. And this is a screenshot from the BBC a few days ago, and you can see that uncertainty and the coronavirus have really triggered a great amount of shift and change in the world. So what I'm going to be talking about is about our relationship with uncertainty. And so none of us like it. It's the not knowing that is the hardest thing to bear. So waiting for news of a loved one in A&E is probably much harder than finding out the facts when we get them. And so from our understanding of worry, we know that uncertainty, and it's the unknowingness of things, the idea that uncertainty brings with it multiple possible negative outcomes. Unfortunately, there's a sense that there's an endlessness to a worry stream. So worry is a very divergent thinking process. This uncertainty fuels worry, and the worry that we'll go on to talk about can take us on torturous roller coaster rides of imagined horrors and anxieties. And so, and the kinds of paths that the worry can take are many and multiple. So the worry itself then unfortunately begins to generate its own uncertainty. So worrying is a response to uncertainty, but worry also then fuels further uncertainty. So we've all been worried in the last few weeks. I think one of the key messages here is that worry at this time is an absolutely understandable experience. So worrying about our families, worrying about health, worrying about whether we've got access to medications, whether we can get food, maybe worrying about our children's education and what that's going to mean for them in the longer term. There's a myriad of things that we could worry about. And typically worry, certainly in the cognitive model of worry, is typified by this what if, supposing, just noticing, that kind of statement. So worry is thought to be, well, it's largely a thought-based process, but actually the experience of worry is much more of a physical thing. So we feel worry in muscular tension, in particular in our shoulders. We often feel it in our tummies. My colleague Mark Freeston talks about butterflies with Doc Marten boots pounding on our stomachs. So worry has this very visceral physical experience. It can arrive out the blue. So one minute we're watching the TV and we're enjoying ourselves, and then we will have a trigger thought. What if I can't? What if? Let's think. Thinking about my worry now. What if we run out of food? And then the worry stream starts. So from being sat there in front of the TV, the worry starts and takes me off on this torturous journey. It's often out of our awareness, and you might notice that you're washing the pots with much more vigor, that you're not really washing the pots. Your head is worrying about something that's going on. You might be noticing, or your colleagues or your friends noticing that you're tuned out, you're not connected, you're a bit zoned out. And it's not that you're dissociated as such, it's more that you're caught in a whirlwind of worry in your mind, and you're losing touch with what's going on around you. The things we see and think about in our worry can seem very real. So this emotional roller coaster we go on, it almost sometimes feels as if these things are happening. So we can feel some of those emotions as if we were there. So I often think about worry like the Tasmanian Devil. So some of you will recognize Tasmanian Devil from Bugs Bunny. So when the Tasmanian Devil arrives, it arrives with energy and vigor, and it creates chaos wherever it goes. And once the Tasmanian Devil has left, often there's a sense of exhaustion and demoralization, and we're looking at the after effects of the worry, often feeling fed up with ourselves for worrying yet again. Now, here's a picture of the Grand Canyon, a beautiful picture, and it's a picture that I use to help me to think about uncertainty. So if we imagine worry is the material that we're going to try and use to create a bridge to cross this chasm of uncertainty. The trouble is that because of uncertainty and the nature of worry, it never quite gets to the other end. And so this guy is going to spend a lot of time and energy trying to get across to the other side, when actually, and if I was any good at animation, what I want him to do is just to sit down on that rock and do something else with all of that energy, maybe just to contemplate what he's trying to do, and if he realizes maybe it's time to do something else rather than try to bridge this unbridgeable gap. So worry takes us away from the here and now. It leads us into a future which is often torturous and difficult. It takes us away from the moment, and so that means we're disconnected from what's happening in the here and now. We rarely share what we're worrying about because you might get the headlines from your colleagues. I'm worrying about the kids, or I'm worrying about money, but they won't tell you the detail of their worry. So it's often held within ourselves, and that might lead to a sense of emotional isolation. So worry and uncertainty are related, and maybe we need to think about how we react to uncertainty to help us begin to think about how we might react differently. So I'm going to present you with what is an all or nothing version of how people might react to uncertainty. So some people might react by seeking lots of information. In order to overcome this terrible sense of uncertainty, what I've got to do is find out as much as I possibly can. So I seek more information. The trouble is that often when we seek information, we end up with information that is one thing says one thing says another, and then we don't know what to believe. And so uncertainty can start to creep in as a consequence. On the other hand, someone may just bury their head in the sand. They just don't want to know. They will seek no information at all, and that leaves a gap, an information gap that then worry tries to fill. And of course, the more people worry, the more anxious and uncertain they become. So some people might put off doing something about their worry, or other people might make impulsive snap decisions. All based on a management of the intolerance of uncertainty. We've seen it in the press that some people prepare for the worst, they stockpile. So I'm sure somewhere in the UK there's a huge stockpile of toilet paper that we're all looking for, or cans of tomato soup and tinned tomatoes, I think. But some people will prepare for the worst. They'll stockpile, while other people, on the other hand, at the other end of that spectrum, will make no preparations whatsoever. Again, this kind of idea of burying their head in the sand. So blocking the world out, not really wanting to know what's going on, versus being acutely tuned in to uncertainty in the world. So the question is, how might you react to uncertainty? How do I react to uncertainty? And in terms of what is most helpful, it's trying to find the right balance between these two extremes, because these methods and behaviors that we are engaging in to manage uncertainty, unfortunately, tend to make uncertainty worse. So what can I do about my worry? So well, let's just think about the worry symptoms. So worry, some of you may know, diagnostically, generalized anxiety disorder has a particular set of symptoms that we have. So muscular tension, I said earlier, it's really felt in the shoulders. Often people complain of headaches, tension headaches, feeling restless. I think this third one, fatigue, is actually really critically important at the moment. My personal experience of COVID-19 is that I'm much more tired, and I guess I was reflecting on that, and I think it's because it's 24/7. You can't get away from this. It's around you wherever you are, whether you're at home or work or whatever. Worry comes along with a sense of being irritable, and just maybe some of you might have heard other people saying, or even felt yourself, that we might be more likely to get angry as a consequence of feeling worried. So noticing people gathering in groups and not social distancing, for example, or noticing the person in the supermarket who's got 15 packets of something and feeling annoyed with them. So sleep problems are a real part of worry, and often worry arrives in the middle of the night when we least want it to. And of course, concentration problems, because if our mind is being wrestled away from what we're trying to focus on, then that's going to be really tricky. So just to think about this. So maybe for those of us who struggle with tension, maybe a hot bath, some gentle stretching, maybe yoga might help. If you're noticing feeling restless and keyed up, again, maybe some music or gentle exercise, noticing it, of course, tuning into it, and then asking yourself, what can I do about this? Importantly, and I hope it's okay to sort of really just take a moment and say it's important we stop and rest and take breaks. I think fatigue, is part of the experience of COVID-19. So being kind to yourself, making sure we eat the right sort of stuff and we don't drink too much, but we drink the right kind of stuff as well. So looking after our bodies, and they will look after us. Some advice from a guy who spent 18 months self-isolating. He was in the European Space Agency program for trying to work out what happens to people when they're put in isolation. They're thinking about flying people to Mars and so on. And he said that actually noticing that tensions need to be noticed, but also de-escalated, because actually I think at the moment you might notice it with your colleagues, your family and so on, that everyone is feeling a bit more tense. So giving yourself and others a little more slack, counting to 10. I know it's simple, but that might be one of the things that helps before responding. Sleep, we could probably have a whole webcast on sleep, but in terms of worry, one of the things that people often report being very helpful is keeping a worry pen and paper by the bed, write your worries down, and of course, keeping an eye on good sleep hygiene. You can find more information on the CNTW website for that. And for concentration, actually, it's bringing your awareness back to the moment using different sensations, the sounds around you, the smells. So if I'm having dinner with my family, then maybe it's time I stopped and tasted what I was eating rather than eating while worrying, because that's something that I have a tendency to do. So one of the things we might try to do when we've got things we want to, that are going on, that we might try and block it out. We might try and push it away. And in some ways, given the circumstances, there may be good reasons for doing this. We'll talk more about some of the ideas a bit later. But as a general rule of thumb, when we try not to think about something, it tends to have the opposite effect. So if I ask you not to think about a pink elephant, many of you will be aware of this idea that the more you try to not think about a pink elephant, the more the pink elephant drops into your head. So trying not to think about something which is upsetting means that it probably arrives all the more. And we spend an awful lot of energy and effort trying to push these things away. So the other thing we might do is become a bit of a worry spotter, so getting our worry spotting binoculars out and beginning to think about the types of worry that we have. So broadly, there are two types of worry: worrying about real events, so and worrying about hypothetical events. So just to spend some time on this. So real events, these are the things that you can show me. So I can show you my credit card and I could say to you, how am I going to solve this problem? I can show you the cracks in my ceiling. I can show you the rust in my car. So a problem that exists in the real world. Can I actually do something about this? And can I do something rather than worrying? The other kind of worry, so to give you an example of this, so my daughter's on her iPad and she's been on her iPad for 3 hours and I'm looking at her and I'm starting to think, oh my word, she's 14 by the way, and now my head is imagining her in her mid-20s living in a flat on her own with no friends, living her life through social media, having a house full of cats, and I'm imagining her life going in this terrible direction, and she's just sat over there on her iPad. So this is the way that worry works. So worry often takes us into the future. And the question that's worth asking is whether we are time traveling with our worry, whether it's taking us off into a horrible and difficult future experience. So there's some more information in the handouts that will point you to. So if we're worrying about real events, so back to these ideas, here's the worry. I can show you what it is. My credit card bill, it's the broken fence, it's the cracks in the ceiling, whatever it might be. It's important to recognize that worrying about the problem is not solving the problem. So worrying about something is not the same as problem solving. And not addressing solvable problems tends to leave loose ends, and that unfortunately leads to more uncertainty, and as you now know, uncertainty leads to more worry. So simple message: if there's a real problem at the heart of your worry, then try to solve the problem. So you might notice or recognize this building. So worrying about real events, and this is the way I think about it, I hope it's helpful for you. Often we worry about something that's the credit card bill, but it very quickly takes us off somewhere else into the future. So it suddenly becomes a hypothetical kind of worry. So my worry about my credit card is now me worrying about my credit status when I'm retired in hundreds of years' time, whatever that might be. So recognizing where the worry's taken us and asking whether we can track that hypothetical worry back down to the ground floor where the problem is, where we can actually do something about it. So real event worries sometimes chain into hypothetical event worries, and just recognizing that that's happened and bringing ourselves back is really important. So what about the other kind of worry? So these hypothetical worries, we worry about things in the future, things that haven't happened yet. What do we do about that? So remembering that we might be time traveling. So first thing to do is come back to our guy on the edge of the gorge, the golden, it's you know what I'm talking about, the picture. So he's standing on the edge, he's looking out across the Grand Canyon. Thankfully it came back to me. So recognize that I'm wrestling with uncertainty, that worrying will not solve this. It won't get me across this chasm that I'm trying to get across. Can I sit with this? Can I be with this? And maybe there's something else I can try and do. So particularly with hypothetical worries, and the evidence base would suggest that exposing ourselves, writing the worries down, and this, I think, has lots of different effects. One is that it enables us to see the worry. Often worry is a circular, divergent process. So writing stuff down makes it a serial experience. You can see it. It helps you get some distance on it. And it's not that we want you to get used to the things that you see in these horrible worries. It's more that you can begin to see them for what they are. They're just worries. So you might ask yourself, is there something I can do right now to help me with this worry? You know, something very practical I can do. Is there something I can do to take my mind away from the worry for now? Maybe watching a video or a box set. I'm lucky I live by the coast, so taking a walk can help. Certainly walking along the beach is one way that I kind of work with my worry if I have it. Can I reconnect with the moment? So remembering that worry takes us away from being in the here and now. So there are things that maybe we can do if you have a mindfulness practice, even breathing, but actually just looking up and looking around you and asking yourself, what's here right now? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can, if you're eating, what can I taste? Can I feel my feet on the floor right now? Sorry, this is hidden behind a little picture of someone. Can't read that. We'll come back to that. Could I share my worry with someone I trust? I'm sure you've all had the experience of sharing worry. And once you've done that, once it's out in the ether, you can begin to see it for what it is and put it in perspective. Some people find having worry time periods very helpful. So setting a time of day when you want to worry about something, say 9 o'clock in the morning, between 9 and 10, and that's when I'm going to worry about it. So when you have a worry, you make a note of it, and then you use your worry period to worry about that. It might be as simple as saying out loud, there's nothing that I can do about this right now, you know, because that in some ways is often the reality of the situation you're in. And critically importantly, worries are thoughts. They're not premonitions. They're not real. So recognizing that while we have very creative minds, our unfortunate creative minds can often create things which then haunt us in our worries. So it's important we keep perspective. This pandemic, like the other pandemics we've faced as a global community, has a beginning, a middle, and it will have an end. Now, at the moment, I guess we're somewhere in the middle, and I hope that we're moving past the middle as we speak. So recognize that there's been waves and waves of change over the last few weeks, and that you've already come through every day getting used to today's new normal. And so with change comes uncertainty. So while it might have been difficult, that you've already managed a lot of change, uncertainty and worry. There is more uncertainty to come, but for me, I'm looking forward to things getting back to normal, like the traffic on the coast road, like seeing people in their cars. That would be good. So remind yourself that increased worrying at a time like this is normal and it could be helpful. And it's not about not worrying. This is normal. It's about doing other things as well as worrying and in spite of this. And perhaps you'd like to try some of the ideas that you've heard in this presentation. Thank you for watching, and I'll hand you back to Richard now for any questions, and stay well and keep safe.